No one survived 30 days in his mine until she upended the billionaire mining magnate's world. Eleanor Harper rode into Blackridge Gulch beneath a blistering sun. Tumbleweeds skittered across dusty streets, and the wind carried whispers of miners who had vanished within 30 days of entering Augustine Bainbridge's mine. No one survived 30 days in his mine until she arrived. She dismounted before the weathered saloon, her boots sinking into grit. Rumors clung to every board, cave-ins that swallowed men whole, mysterious illnesses that struck without warning, and a darkness deeper than any shaft. Eleanor pushed back a stray lock of chestnut hair and squared her shoulders. She had reason to believe she could defy the legend. Inside the saloon, men paused mid-drink, eyes narrowing as she approached the bar. Her accent carried traces of places far from here, places where she had engineered solutions under impossible conditions. Now she held a single purpose, to unearth what fate had stifled. Augustine Bainbridge sat at a corner table, his silk vest crisp, his gaze as cold as the gold veins rumored to run through his claim. He raised a glass. Eleanor set down her satchel and met his stare. "I heard your mind devours men in 30 days, she said, voice steady. The room fell silent. "I'll prove it doesn't have to." Laughter rippled among the miners, but Bainbridge's lips curved in a thin smile. $40,000 says you fail before sunrise on the 30th day. His words clinked like chains. A murmur surged. The challenge was set, drawing every gambler's eye. Eleanor lifted her chin. Done. As the crowd surged around her, she felt the weight of their doubt and the spark of their hope. If she endured, she would upend the world of the billionaire mining magnate himself. Eleanor stood at the gaping mouth of Blackridge Mine at dawn, the rising sun casting long shadows across the timbered entrance. The air smelled of damp earth and old timber, an ominous reminder of what lay beneath. She adjusted her leather gloves and tightened the straps on her pack, which contained ropes, a carbide lamp, and her engineering tools. Beside her, José Pepe Ramirez offered a curt nod. "Ready when you are, Miss Harper," he said, voice low and steady. He was lean and weathered, his dark eyes betraying decades of subterranean toil. He had survived more than 30 days by adapting to the mine's hidden dangers, and he respected her resolve. Eleanor inhaled, steeling herself. "Let's prove we can outlast the curse." They stepped onto the descending wooden ladder, each rung groaning under their weight. Below, pitch-black corridors branched into tangled networks of shafts and drifts. The carbide lamp illuminated rough-hewn walls, streaked with mineral veins. Here and there, abandoned tools lay half-buried under piles of rubble. "Most miners never ventured past the second level," Pepe warned. "That's where the earth shifts unpredictably. You'll want to mark your route." Eleanor nodded and tapped her lamp twice. A faint echo answered. She began carving chalk arrows on the timber supports, pointing deeper. Keeping close to Pepe, she listened to the soft drip of water and the distant whisper of shifting stone. Their boots kicked up dust that glittered in the lamp's beam. They reached the first junction, a collapsed passage blocked by splintered beams. Eleanor knelt to examine the fracture lines in the surrounding rock. "This timber gave way under stress," she observed. "We'll need to shore up the next section, or it could collapse entirely." Pepe watched as she produced small wooden wedges and a hammer. With deft precision, she reinforced the crossbeams, testing each one before moving on. "Engineering," he murmured, half in admiration, half in disbelief. An hour later, they entered a cavernous chamber where the ceiling arched high above. Water pooled in shallow basins, reflecting the lamp's glow. Eleanor knelt and scooped a handful of water, observing its clarity. "No toxic runoff," she concluded. "That's good. If it stays this way, we avoid poisoning." They pressed on, following the chalk arrows into narrower tunnels. At one turn, a draft of cold air whispered past them, carrying a metallic scent. Eleanor paused. "Airflow. There must be an open shaft above that we haven't found on the surface map." Pepe frowned. "You think this place connects to another mine? Or a ventilation gallery long forgotten?" she replied, eyes bright with curiosity. She marked the spot and continued, probing with her lamp. Deeper and deeper they went, the darkness thick as velvet. Every so often the floor trembled, a subtle warning of shifting earth. Eleanor's heart pounded, but she kept her breathing steady. She would not yield to fear. At last they reached a narrow ledge overlooking a chasm so deep it swallowed the light. Stalactites dripped silently from above, and the far wall was lost in gloom. Eleanor set down her pack and shone her lamp across the breadth of the divide. There, etched into the rock, were symbols carved by miners long gone, lines and dots that hinted at hidden veins. Pepe placed a hand on her shoulder. "They wanted you to see this," he said softly. Eleanor studied the carvings, tracing them with her gloved finger. "They left clues," she whispered. "They believed someone could follow." As she prepared to descend into the unknown, the distant rumble of stone shifting echoed through the chamber, a reminder that time was not on their side. She lifted her lamp and met Pepe's determined gaze. "Onward," she said. Eleanor descended a narrow rope into the chasm, each footfall echoing against unseen walls. Jose steadied her by the waist, guiding her toward a ledge illuminated by her lamp. There, half buried under rubble, lay a rusted metal box stamped with the Bainbridge insignia. She pried it open with her engineering pick. Inside, neatly rolled blueprints depicted hidden support tunnels and collapsed galleries marked for abandonment. One sketch bore a handwritten note in faded ink: "Reinforce before descent or risk collapse." Pepe frowned as he examined the plans. He knew the dangers and never acted. Eleanor's gaze hardened. Bainbridge put profit above safety. He allowed those men to die. A distant rumble made them freeze. Dust fell from the ceiling like trembling rain. Eleanor secured the box in her satchel and signaled Pepe to retreat. They climbed back to the main ledge just as a section of rock gave way behind them. The collapse thundered below, sealing off the path they had just traveled. Pepe exhaled. He could have prevented that. Now we must find another route. Eleanor studied her maps and the blueprints. There is a drainage shaft east of here. It links to the lower galleries. We can follow it to the central vein. She led the way across a narrow plank spanning a chasm. The wood creaked alarmingly, but held firm beneath her weight. On the far side, a tunnel sloped downward, water dripping into shallow rivulets. The air grew colder, and the beam of her lamp revealed wooden braces riddled with wormholes. Eleanor knelt to inspect a support beam. She pressed her hand against the grain and uncovered fresh scratch marks. Someone has been here recently. Pepe drew his revolver and scanned the darkness. "Bandits or Bainbridge's men spying on us?" A muffled voice called from deeper in the tunnel. Eleanor rose and called back, "We mean no harm. We only seek safe passage and the truth." Footsteps approached. A figure emerged, an anxious miner named Thomas, who had survived just past the 30-day mark. He raised his hands. "I saw them plant explosives in the northern drift," he whispered. "They plan to collapse the mine and blame you." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "We must warn the others and disarm those charges." She turned to Pepe. "We cannot win this alone." He nodded. "Then we find allies before time runs out." They pressed on, guided by the flicker of hope and the lamp's glow. Back in Blackridge Gulch, the sun dipped low as miners emerged, blinking from underground toil. Word traveled fast. Eleanor and Pepe had breached forbidden galleries and uncovered sabotage plots. Augustine Bainbridge paced before his grand office, the evening breeze ruffling his tailored coat, his jaw clenched at the news delivered by a breathless overseer. "They found explosives in the northern drift, sir," the man stammered, "and they've rallied half the crew against us." Bainbridge's eyes narrowed. "Explain," he demanded, voice cold. "They believe you intended to bury them alive when the mine's value plummeted. They call Eleanor Harper a hero." A harsh laugh escaped him. "Then make them fearful again. Hire armed guards. Spread rumors that she's a thief." On the dusty street, Eleanor conferred with Thomas and several sympathetic miners around a lantern on the saloon steps. Their faces were grim with resolve. "If we can disarm those charges," Thomas whispered, "we'll save lives and expose Bainbridge's tyranny." Eleanor nodded. "We need tools and manpower. Tonight, we secure the drift. At dawn, we strike." As they dispersed, Pepe remained by her side. "Are you sure you want to risk more lives?" Her gaze was steady. "They trusted me when Bainbridge refused. I won't abandon them." Under the cover of darkness, Eleanor led Pepe and a small group to the mine entrance. Armed guards blocked the way, muskets leveled. One guard stepped forward, sneering, "Back off, engineer. Bainbridge orders you gone." Eleanor raised her lantern. "I have proof of his murderous scheme. Let us pass, or we'll make it public." The guards hesitated as Thomas slipped forward, brandishing the blueprints and exploded detonator components. Murmurs rose among them. A tense silence fell. Finally, one guard lowered his weapon. "I'd rather face Bainbridge's wrath than mine, miss." He stepped aside. Inside, pale lamplight revealed stockpiled explosives wired to the main support timbers. Eleanor's heart pounded as she and Pepe moved swiftly, cutting fuses and dismantling triggers. Sparks flew when Pepe clipped a live connection, but he held his nerve. Minutes later, the last device lay inert. Eleanor exhaled. No more deception underground. As they emerged, dawn's first light tinted the horizon. Miners gathered in the square, curious faces turned toward the saloon. Bainbridge appeared on the veranda, flanked by his overseer. He raised a hand for silence. "Eleanor Harper has proven herself dangerous and deceitful. But today, we learned the truth of her courage." His voice trembled with forced calm. "She saved lives the company jeopardized. From this moment on, she commands respect in Blackridge Mine." A roar of approval erupted. Miners cheered, stamping boots on the wooden planks. Eleanor met Pepe's eye, a small smile forming. She had turned the tide on the surface as she did below. Eleanor awoke before sunrise, the memory of last night's rumble echoing in her mind. She met Pepe at the mine entrance as amber light broke over the gulch. The air was cool, and a fine dust coated everything, an ever-present reminder of Blackridge's peril. "I reviewed Thomas's sketch," Eleanor said, unfolding the tattered paper beneath a lantern's glow. "There's a ventilation shaft here, but it's been sealed for decades. If we reopen it, we'll improve air circulation and uncover an alternate route to the central vein." Pepe traced the lines with a gloved finger. "That shaft collapsed long ago. It's more of a burial chamber now." "Which makes it the perfect hidden passage," she replied. "We'll need to tunnel through carefully, shore it with supports, and bypass the dangerous drift entirely." They descended into the mine together, chalk arrows marking their reclaimed trail. The main drift was quiet, too quiet. Eleanor paused by a support beam gouged with claw-like marks. "We're not alone," she murmured. "Someone's been here since last night." Pepe's hand hovered near his revolver. "Let's keep moving." At the sealed shaft, they found heavy timbers braced against stone. Eleanor placed her hand on the wood and listened. "Hollow," she confirmed. "Beneath lies the old gallery." She produced her crowbar and wedged it between the beams, levering them aside with methodical strength. Dust cascaded as the wood shifted, revealing a narrow opening filled with rubble. Eleanor lit a second lamp and climbed inside. The space was cramped, the walls slick with condensation. She dug with her pick and hauled debris behind her, clearing enough room for Pepe to join. As they tunneled deeper, the air changed, growing stale, then fresher, as if breathing life into their lungs. The slope angled sharply downward, and water trickled along the floor, pooling in a groove carved by long-forgotten miners. "It works," Pepe whispered, awe in his voice. "I can feel the rush of air from the surface." Eleanor paused to reinforce the ceiling with split logs from her pack. "This passage wasn't meant for heavy traffic," she noted. "We'll need constant shoring to prevent collapse." They pressed on until the tunnel opened into a wide cavern. Here, the remnants of an old pump lay rusted and broken. Eleanor examined its mechanisms. "If we can restore this, it will drain floodwater from the lower levels. That gives us safe access to the gold seam." She set to work, her tools clinking against metal. Pepe kept watch, peering into the darkness for any sign of intruders. A distant echoing footstep made him stiffen, but Eleanor's steady calm kept panic at bay. At last, she engaged the pump handle. Gears groaned, and water began to flow into a makeshift channel she'd carved. Golden droplets caught the lamplight, evidence of rich mineral content upstream. A distant shout rang out from the main tunnel. Miners had discovered sabotage elsewhere. Eleanor exchanged a look with Pepe, determination flaring in her eyes. "We've done it," she said softly. "Now we can move forward, without fear of being buried alive." They collected their lamps and turned back toward the chasm, the hidden ventilation passage now their lifeline. Above, dawn's light filtered through the gulch, promising a new day, and the next steps in Eleanor's quest to upend Augustine Bainbridge's world once and for all. Eleanor and Pepe returned to the junction where they had discovered the explosives. The morning light filtered through dust-laden beams, illuminating the splintered wood and jagged rock. Miners moved with purpose along the main drift, reinforcing supports and clearing debris. Despite the sense of optimism in the air, Eleanor felt a chill. The question of who had sabotaged the mine still lingered. "Someone on the inside betrayed us," she said quietly. She studied the faces of the workers as they passed. "We need to find the traitor before he strikes again." Pepe nodded. "The capataz, Morgan Crane, has been acting strange. He avoids my gaze and issues orders in hushed tones." Eleanor's lips curved into a determined smile. "Then we'll confront him." They followed the narrow side tunnel toward Crane's makeshift office, a cleared alcove near the second level. Inside, crates of tools and paperwork were stacked haphazardly, but a single lantern cast a bright pool of light on a rough wooden table. Papers lay strewn across it, including shift rosters and supply requests. Crane stood at the far end, writing feverishly in a ledger. His broad shoulders tensed when he heard their approach. He spun around, eyes darting from Eleanor to Pepe. "Capataz Crane," Eleanor began, voice firm, "we know you planted those explosives." His face drained of color. He shook his head vehemently. "You have no proof." "I do," she replied. She produced one of the detonator clips she had salvaged and laid it on the table. "This came from your personal toolkit." Pepe stepped forward. "We saw you slip into the drift after dark." Crane's fists clenched. "You have no right to accuse me." He struck the ledger, scattering papers. "I was protecting the mine." Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "Protecting it from what?" He swallowed hard, then exhaled in defeat. "Bainbridge ordered me to collapse the old shaft once you exposed the ventilation tunnel. He believed you would lead the miners to revolt and shut down operations." Shock rippled through Eleanor. "You obeyed him?" "It was my job," Crane said, shoulders slumping. "I never wanted anyone to die. I thought if I sealed the drift quickly, we could contain the situation." Pepe's hand tightened on Crane's arm. "Contain it? You risked every life down here." Eleanor knelt to gather the blown fuse ends and wiring fragments. "Your actions nearly killed us all, but your confession will save us." She rose and faced Crane. "Help us now. Show everyone what Bainbridge planned." Crane hesitated, eyes torn. Finally, he nodded grimly. "I'll do it." Together they returned to the central chamber. Eleanor called the miners to assemble around the reinforced timber braces. Crane stepped forward, voice trembling as he recounted Bainbridge's orders and the sabotage plot. Gasps rose among the gathered men and women. Some spat in disgust. Others clenched their tools in righteous anger. "Augustine Bainbridge betrayed his own workforce," Eleanor declared. "He valued profit over human lives. We nearly paid the price." A roar of approval surged through the crowd. Hands pounded on helmets and beams. The miners swore to stand with Eleanor and demand accountability. Word of the revelation reached the surface, where an anxious Augustine Bainbridge watched from his veranda. He saw miners streaming out of the shaft, their faces resolute. His overseer approached, pale and shaken. "They know everything, sir," the man whispered. Bainbridge's jaw tightened. He realized that Eleanor's victory underground had sealed his fate above. Without allies in Blackridge Mine, he stood alone against the will of every man and woman he had once controlled. Below, Eleanor led the miners in a chant of solidarity. Pepe handed her the recovered blueprints. She held them aloft like a banner. "This mine belongs to its people now," she called, "and we will work safely, fairly, and together." As the last echoes faded, Eleanor felt the weight of every life she had saved and the promise of a new era in Blackridge Gulch. Eleanor emerged from the mine with the late afternoon sun at her back. Miners gathered in the open square, before the saloon where the lanterns of celebration still glowed. She laid the recovered blueprints across an overturned barrel. Every tunnel and shaft was mapped out, every support beam and water channel marked for repair. She raised her voice so all could hear. "These plans show us exactly how to work safely and how to share the rewards fairly." A ripple of agreement ran through the crowd. Tomas stepped forward. His face was weathered by dust and sun, but his eyes burned with conviction. "We have labored for years in these depths, only to see a fraction of the gold. It is time we claim our share of what we unearth." Eleanor nodded and pointed to the first clause she had drafted. "Half of the mine's profits will fund ongoing maintenance and safety improvements. Deadly collapses will become history." She ran a finger down the document. "A quarter of the profits will be reinvested in new equipment and exploration to expand the claim, rather than pocketing every cent." A murmur of approval rose. The miners leaned closer. "And the final quarter," Eleanor continued, "will be distributed to the workers at the end of each month. Each share will reflect the days you spent underground." She looked into the eyes of each man and woman before her. "Your work is valuable. Your lives are priceless. This is our promise." Pepe unlocked his hands from behind his back and raised one in support. "We will also form a council composed of elected representatives from each shift. That council, along with the engineer and a rotating supervisor, will make day-to-day decisions." Voices rose as miners voiced questions and suggestions. Some asked for provisions to guarantee fresh water and nutritious meals during long shifts. Others proposed regular inspections by an independent safety committee. Eleanor jotted their ideas on a scrap of paper pinned to a board. As dusk fell, the town council arrived. The sheriff escorted Eleanor and Pepe to a long wooden table set beneath lanterns strung between posts. Merchants and local landowners took seats alongside elected miners. The atmosphere was serious but hopeful. A clerk read the draft charter aloud. Passages on hazard reports, profit accounting, and dispute resolution echoed into the night air. Townsfolk listened quietly, then applauded at key passages. When the clerk finished, the sheriff spoke. "By the authority of Blackridge Gulch, we grant temporary stewardship of the mine to Miss Eleanor Harper, under the conditions of this charter." He dipped a quill and handed it to Eleanor. Her name curved onto the parchment in careful ink. One by one, miners stood at the table to sign. Each signature was accompanied by a nod of approval or a firm handshake. The ledger of tyranny was replaced with the rule of solidarity. As the last signature dried, Eleanor stood and raised her tin mug of coffee. "To Blackridge Mine, may our work honor the earth, reward our labor, and protect our lives." A cheer shook the saloon boards. Hammers and picks rang once more with renewed purpose. In the glow of lantern light, the community embraced a new dawn. High above on his veranda, Augustine Bainbridge watched through narrowed eyes. The charter's text reached him on the wind, carried by conversation. He realized that power was no longer his alone. The mine belonged to its people now. Below, Eleanor walked through the crowd, quietly offering thanks to every miner. She felt the weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, but it was tempered by unity and hope. She had not only survived 30 days in the mine, she had forged a future far brighter than any king of gold could promise. By first light, Eleanor gathered her lantern, her tools, and a handful of trusted miners at the entrance to Blackridge's newest shaft. The freshly drafted charter stood in their minds as both shield and promise, a covenant that bound them to one another as they pressed deeper into the earth. The air grew steadily warmer and heavier as they descended past reinforced supports. Each beam bore the miners' names in chalk, a testament to their solidarity and shared risk. Pepe led with measured steps, lamp held high, while Tomas carried extra rope and powder charges in case they needed to widen the passage. At the 30-foot mark, the tunnel opened into a narrow gallery lined with gleaming quartz. Eleanor's lamp caught flecks of gold, shining like distant stars embedded in the rock. She ran her gloved fingers along the vein, smiling at the promise of genuine treasure. "This is it," she whispered. "The heart of the seam." Pepe knelt to take core samples, placing them carefully in leather bags. "High yield," he confirmed. "Better than anything Bainbridge ever reached." They pressed on until they reached a vast chamber where an ancient water wheel lay rusting on its side. The wheel once powered pumps that managed flooding in high water seasons. Eleanor examined the mechanism. "If we restore this, we can keep the vein dry and extend our reach safely." Minutes later, she and Pepe began clearing debris around the wheel, miners heaving broken timbers and collapsed ore from its spokes. Water trickled down the chamber's walls, forming rivulets that pooled at their feet. The constant drip echoed like a metronome, marking their progress through the mine's hidden heart. Suddenly, a low groan shook the chamber. A section of the ceiling cracked, sending dust and small stones raining down. Miners froze as a fissure split the quartz face, revealing a secondary vein further back in the wall. A murmur of astonishment swept through them, an undiscovered chamber rich with gold. Eleanor's eyes widened. "They never reached this far," she said, voice hushed with awe. This was concealed by layers of shale and quartz, a final prize. Pepe tapped his lamp against his helmet. "We must map it immediately and secure every entry. This vein will sustain the mine for years." More. They spread out, chalking arrows and mapping the new chamber's dimensions on scrap paper. Careful measurements and detailed notes ensured that every corridor and crosscut would be planned with safety in mind. Miners marked potential collapse points and identified spots for additional supports. As they worked, the distant sound of the surface bell tolled noon. The echo reverberated through the network of tunnels, an audible reminder that above them, townsfolk waited for progress reports and proof that the charter's promises were not hollow words. Eleanor paused and looked around at the miners, faces streaked with sweat and dirt, eyes flickering with hope in the lamplight. She realized that this discovery went beyond gold. It symbolized the community's capacity to thrive when treated with respect and trust. She drew a deep breath and spoke, voice steady and clear. "Today, we secure not just the vein, but our future. Each of you will share in these riches. We will build schools, repair our homes, and fund medical care for injured miners. This mine belongs to every one of us." A cheer rose, muffled in the cavernous chamber, but no less genuine. Miners clasped shoulders, forging bonds stronger than steel beams. Eleanor turned to Pepe. "Let's get that wheel turning again." As they began the laborious task of restoring the pump, the new vein glimmered behind them, a promise reborn beneath the earth. Eleanor paused at the edge of the newly mapped chamber, lantern in hand, as the miners completed the last markings on the fresh vein. The flicker of light danced across quartz walls, illuminating flecks of gold that shimmered like distant galaxies. For a moment, triumph held the cavern in gentle suspension, until a deep, resonant rumble shuddered through the floor. Pepe's lamp swung as he braced himself against a support beam. "That's not normal settling," he muttered, voice tense. "Something's shifting." Eleanor set her jaw. "Stay sharp. We've reinforced every support, but this chamber is bigger than any we've shored yet. Let's trace the tremors." They moved carefully toward the northern wall, where rock fractures spidered across the face. Water dripped from a high crevice, feeding a pool that pooled below. Eleanor knelt to inspect the cracks, tracing a line with her gloved fingertip. "This fracture leads back to the old drainage level," she observed. "If that channel gives way, we risk flooding these galleries." Thomas stepped up, his pickaxe slung over his shoulder. "Then let's shore it now. I'll bring the timber." As Thomas vanished into the twisting tunnels, Eleanor and Pepe marked evacuation points and emergency exits with bright chalk crosses, ensuring every miner knew the quickest route to safety. Minutes later, Thomas returned with a cart of split logs and planks. Together, they erected sturdy braces along the cracked wall, nailing each beam securely and wedging it tight against the ceiling. Every strike of the hammer felt like a drumbeat in Eleanor's chest. The cavern's groaning subsided, but a low tremor persisted, a reminder that the earth refused to lie still. "That should hold," she said at last, testing the beam with her shoulder. "But we need a permanent fix." Pepe nodded. "There's a cluster of steel girders in the old supply room. If we bolt them across that fracture, it'll last." Eleanor consulted her map. Supply room's 2 galleries back and up a level. "We'll need to haul them manually. No carts on that incline." She ran a hand through her damp hair. "Call for volunteers." A dozen miners stepped forward without hesitation. They understood the stakes. Their lives and livelihood depended on the mine's integrity. Under Eleanor's direction, they formed chains to pass beams and bolts, moving with a synchronized precision born of shared purpose. The ascent was grueling. Shallow steps carved into rock led them upward, packs heavy with steel, muscles straining. Sweat and determination mingled on their brows. When they reached the fracture, they positioned the girders across the vein's most vulnerable section, bolting each one with iron rivets and torque wrenches. Sparks flew in brief flashes against the lamplit gloom. By the time the last bolt clicked into place, the tremors had ceased. The cavern grew eerily still, as if exhaling relief. Miners raised their lamps in victory, illuminating proud, grimy faces. Eleanor allowed herself a small smile, though fatigue tugged at her limbs. "Excellent work," she praised. "This chamber is secure, at least for the foreseeable future. We'll monitor it daily, but tonight we've bought ourselves time." A murmur of approval rose. Thomas clasped Eleanor's shoulder. "You saved us again. We owe you more than gold." Eleanor's gaze traveled to the glinting vein beyond the supports. "The true wealth here isn't just the gold. It's how we stand together when the ground quakes beneath us." As they prepared to descend back to the main gallery, a distant echo floated through the tunnels, the steady ring of the surface bell, calling for the midday report. Eleanor knew the townsfolk waited, eager for news of progress. She felt the weight of expectation, but also the quiet pride that comes from collective achievement. Pepe met her side, lamp raised. "Ready to share the story above ground?" Eleanor nodded, lamplight reflecting in her determined eyes. "Let's tell them that Blackridge Mine is more than a claim. It's our home." Late that afternoon, the sky above Blackridge Gulch glowed in bruised purples and oranges. A dusty breeze drifted through the streets as townsfolk paused their daily chores, exchanging whispers about the events unfolding underground. Word had spread that Eleanor Harper would confront Augustine Bainbridge himself at sunset on the saloon's veranda. Eleanor adjusted the lapels of her leather jacket, her tools and maps secured in a satchel at her side. Pepe and Tomas flanked her, their expressions resolute. Behind them, a dozen miners, each bearing the soot of labor and the determination of survivors, stood ready as silent witnesses to this reckoning. At the appointed hour, Bainbridge stepped onto the veranda, his expensive boots clicking on the wooden boards. His silk cravat was loosened, and the usual veneer of unshakable confidence flickered as he took in the gathering crowd. The setting sun cast his long shadow across the swaying lanterns hung from the eaves. "Miss Harper," he began, his voice tight, "your charter and your so-called reforms are an affront to every principle of enterprise I uphold." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "The principle that counts, Mr. Bainbridge, is justice. You risked the lives of scores of men and women to protect your profits. We stood up for ourselves. Now we demand accountability." He straightened, nostrils flaring. "Accountability? You're an outsider. You know nothing of the risks inherent in mining. Safety costs money, money that I've invested heavily. Without control, this mine collapses under its own weight." A murmur rippled through the miners. Tomas stepped forward. "We've already reinforced every tunnel and secured new passages. We've discovered richer veins than you ever found. Under Eleanor's guidance, this mine will prosper more than under your solitary command." Bainbridge's gaze flicked to the saloon doors, where women and children peeked anxiously. "You don't understand the dangers," he insisted. "Floods, collapses, gas pockets. This place could still kill hundreds." Eleanor raised her free hand. "Then trust the Charter's safeguards. Inspections, maintenance funds, elected oversight. We've lived through 30 days of hell down there and emerged stronger. We will monitor hazards daily. If the mine falters, we bear responsibility." Pepe produced the small metal box containing the sabotage evidence. He held it aloft. "Here is proof of your plan to bury your own workforce. You wanted to collapse the mine and collect insurance on equipment and land. You gambled with lives." Bainbridge's face hardened. His lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment, the wind caught the cravat at his throat like a tether pulling him forward. Then he spoke, voice low and brittle. "You leave me no choice." He turned to the overseer who stood behind him. At his nod, 2 armed guards stepped forward, horns of their rifles resting against their shoulders. The crowd tensed. Eleanor stepped forward another pace, lamp in hand, its lens refracting the dying light. "We will not be intimidated." Her voice rang clear. "Release those rifles, or I call upon every miner, every townsfolk to disarm your thugs." The guards hesitated, then lowered their weapons on Bainbridge's shouted order. The overseer's eyes darted nervously. Bainbridge's shoulders sagged in defeat. He took a trembling breath. "Fine. The Charter stands. You have my word, and this time I mean it." He looked out at the faces of miners, council members, and townspeople. "I cede management to Miss Harper and her council. The mine and the profits are yours to share as you wish." A stunned silence held the gulch. Then Thomas let out a whoop, and miners erupted into cheers. Women clapped and children ran forward. Eleanor allowed herself a small, triumphant smile. Bainbridge folded his arms and looked away, pride wounded but legacy intact only by renouncing power. Eleanor turned to Pepe and Tomas, nodding in gratitude. Together, they had unseated a billionaire magnate and installed a system rooted in fairness and safety. As the sun dipped below the horizon, lantern light and torch glow lit the faces of a victorious community. Eleanor knew challenges remained. Markets fluctuated, equipment wore, and the shafts still demanded vigilance. But for tonight, Blackridge Mine belonged to its people, and in their hands it would shine brighter than any legend of greed or curse. Eleanor awoke before dawn to the steady clatter of hammers and the faint smell of fresh-cut timber. Blackridge Mine, once a place of dread and whispered curses, now thrummed with purposeful activity. As she stepped into the crisp morning air, she saw miners hauling beams, blacksmiths forging new tools, and engineers poring over blueprints beneath makeshift tents. The Charter's promise, fairness, safety, shared prosperity, was materializing before her eyes. She joined Pepe and Tomas at the heart of the operation, the newly cleared central courtyard behind the saloon, where a temporary workshop had been erected. Stacks of rough lumber lined one side, barrels of fast-drying sealant stood nearby. Piles of replacement hardware lay neatly on wooden pallets. A chalkboard displayed the day's tasks, reinforcing the upper galleries, widening the main haulage shaft, repairing the drainage pump, and commissioning a safety inspection team. "Good morning," Eleanor called, her voice carrying over the clamor. Workers paused to tip their hats, tools in hand. She scanned the list and nodded to Pepe. "How are we on the drainage pump restoration?" Pepe wiped his brow and tracked down the freshly repaired water wheel in the old chamber. We've realigned the drive gears, replaced the corroded axle seals, and recalibrated the valve mechanism. Once we test it under full flow, we can guarantee dry galleries even during heavy runoff. Excellent, Eleanor replied. That frees up the ventilation shaft to clear more debris. Tomas, how many support beams have we installed so far? Tomas consulted his ledger. 58 reinforced beams and 20 steel girders. We still need 30 more beams for the northern drift, but that team should finish by midday. Eleanor turned to address the gathered crew. Today marks the first full week under our charter. Already, we've increased ore output by 15%, reduced accident reports to 0, and unearthed a new vein richer than any before. But our greatest success is the trust we've built. Keep this pace, and Blackridge will set a new standard for mining across the frontier. A chorus of approval met her words. Miners pounded helmets on chests, and women tending the commissary cheered as they delivered hot coffee and sandwiches. The atmosphere brimmed with energy and shared purpose. While the workforce split into teams, some shuttling rock and debris, others evaluating shoring points, Eleanor convened a council meeting in the restored office above the saloon. Elected representatives from each shift gathered around a sturdy table. Mary Bishop, the head cook, Samuel Briggs, the safety inspector, Luis Garcia, the drill operator, and Helena Cho, the supply manager. The town sheriff and a local merchant also attended as liaison observers. Eleanor laid out 3 agenda items: an educational fund for miners' children, a community medical station, and the allocation of this month's profit share. She passed around ledgers showing exact yields and expenses. The numbers glowed with transparency. No hidden fees, no unexplained deductions. First, they discussed the education fund. Mary proposed converting the empty schoolhouse at the edge of town into a miners' academy, offering basic reading, writing, and arithmetic for employees' families. Helena seconded, suggesting evening classes for miners themselves, so they could learn arithmetic for more precise sampling and mapping. Samuel then outlined plans for the medical station. He had recruited Dr. Evelyn Harper, no relation to Eleanor, a former Army field medic turned licensed clinician who agreed to lease a cabin near the mine entrance at cost. They would stock it with basic supplies, bandages, antiseptics, pain relievers, and emergency stretchers. The station would be funded by a small percentage, 3%, of monthly profits, ensuring sustainability. Finally, they turned to profit distribution. Luis reviewed the yield and reminded the group of the 50 to 25 to 25 split ratified at the charter's founding, then distributed participation certificates to everyone to be divided among 120 workers. Each miner would receive 16.25 ounces, with 2 bonus ounces allotted to those who had worked over 30 days consecutively. The council members discussed logistics, minting certificates, scheduling payouts, and ensuring security during transport to the assay office. The sheriff volunteered to oversee the process. A motion passed unanimously. Eleanor leaned back, satisfaction warming her. This is exactly why we fought so hard. Every ounce of gold we extract empowers our community, our children, our families, our futures. As the meeting adjourned, a cheer rose outside. Miners filed back to their shifts, some clutching their share certificates, others eager to report for duty. Eleanor stepped onto the veranda and watched the bustle below, a living testament to transformation. By midday, the drainage pump roared back to life, water levels dropping rapidly in the lower shafts. The call of the bells signaled another successful test. Miners emerged, wiping grime and beaming at one another. News spread that the new vein's first samples were heading to town for assay, promising a record return. Eleanor felt the sun's warmth on her face and the hum of community in her ears. The journey from cursed mine to communal enterprise was far from over, but the foundations were laid. A week had passed since the miners ratified the charter. Blackridge Gulch thrummed with renewed life. The assay results arrived. The new veins ore assayed at a purity 20% higher than earlier seams, promising unprecedented yields. Word spread quickly beyond the gulch, drawing prospectors, merchants and investors eager to buy shares in the newly communal enterprise. Eleanor stood in the back of the town hall as the first delegation of outside investors filed in. She'd insisted that any discussions occur in public view, so transparency remained paramount. The hall's rough wooden benches were filled with miners, council members and townsfolk, all eyes fixed on the investors' polished boots and flashy waistcoats. The lead investor, Charles Montgomery, stepped forward. His confident smile and gold-rimmed spectacles bespoke city sophistication. He cleared his throat and addressed the assembly. "Miss Harper, Messrs. Ramirez and Briggs, congratulations on your operation thus far. We represent Eastern Capital syndicates interested in providing an influx of funds for equipment upgrades and faster expansion. In return, we request a controlling interest, 20% of Blackridge Mine's profits for the next 2 years. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some miners exchanged wary glances. Others, tempted by promises of more modern drills and steam-powered pumps, leaned forward. Eleanor weighed the proposal. External funding could accelerate safety improvements and triple extraction rates, but ceding control risked undermining the Charter's democratic foundations. She spoke clearly. "Mr. Montgomery, we appreciate your offer. However, our Charter grants decision-making power to our elected council. Any investment must adhere to the Charter's principles of shared governance and profit distribution. We cannot surrender control for capital alone." Montgomery's smile faltered, replaced by a thin line. "Miss Harper, I do not doubt your sincerity, but banks and syndicates expect certain assurances. In the city, investors hold sway, and leverage is how they protect their assets." Samuel Briggs, the safety inspector, rose to his full height. "Here in Blackridge, our assets are men and women who risk their lives daily. We will not trade their safety or our autonomy for outside profit margins." His voice echoed in the hall. A ripple of applause followed. Montgomery pursed his lips and consulted his notes. "Very well. Perhaps a smaller stake then, 10% for enhanced ventilation systems and emergency response infrastructure." He paused. "And a seat on your management council." Helena Cho, the supply manager, stood. "Our council seats are elected. An investor's seat would violate our charter. We welcome suggestions and philanthropy, but final authority remains with our community." The hall buzzed as miners voiced support. A pattern emerged. No concessions would be granted if they threatened the charter's integrity. Montgomery's staff exchanged uneasy looks. After a tense silence, he closed his notebook. "I respect your convictions. We will consider a purely philanthropic partnership, no profit claim, just equipment donations." A cheer broke out at this unexpected compromise. Eleanor allowed herself a cautious smile. "If you wish to support improved rescue gear, portable lighting, and medical supplies, we welcome your assistance without altering governance. Our charter stands." Montgomery inclined his head. "Agreed." He signaled his team to distribute brochures detailing donated equipment, reinforced helmets with mounted lamps, galvanic metal detectors for unstable pockets, and field stretchers. Miners eagerly examined prototypes. As the investors departed, Eleanor stepped onto the step where she first challenged Bainbridge. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dais. She addressed the assembly. "Our principles have been tested by outside forces. We have upheld our charter. Let this be a testament. Cooperation enriches all, but only when trust and autonomy are preserved." A chorus of approval rang out. Miners and townsfolk stamped their boots, voices rising in unison. The spirit of Blackridge Mine burned brighter than any investor's gold. That evening, as lanterns flickered in the saloon, Eleanor and Pepe pored over the day's ledgers. The donated equipment would arrive next week. Funding for the medical station was secure. The educational academy would begin enrollment soon. Yet challenges remained. Rumors swirled of competitors jealous of Blackridge's success, rogue claim jumpers and unscrupulous outlaw bands threatening the Gulch's security. The Charter Council drafted night patrols and negotiated with the sheriff to bolster town defenses. Eleanor studied her map by lamplight. Lines of tunnels traced in chalk reminded her of the fragile balance they maintained. Wealth, safety, community, they were all interwoven. A misstep could unravel everything they had built. She closed her notebook and looked at Pepe. We've weathered internal sabotage, investor pressure, and natural hazards. The final trials will come from beyond these walls. Competition, lawlessness, and the shifting tides of fortune. Pepe nodded, eyes steady. Then we face them together. Blackridge stands or falls by our unity. Eleanor rose and gazed out the saloon window into the moonlit gulch. In the distance, the silhouette of the water wheel turned slowly, a rhythmic heartbeat beneath the silent sky. The mine had become more than a source of gold. It was a beacon of hope in the unforgiving West. Word of Blackridge Mine's success spread like wildfire through the frontier. By dawn, prospectors and claim jumpers rode into the gulch, eyes alight with greed, while whispers of an impending outlaw raid sent shivers through the town. Sheriff Lawson assembled his deputies at the edge of the main street, rifles at the ready, as Eleanor and the council debated defensive measures beneath the flicker of lanterns. Eleanor studied a rough map pinned atop barrels in the saloon's back room. They'll approach under cover of darkness, she warned. The arroyo to the east offers them a hidden approach to our newly reinforced shafts. Samuel Briggs, safety inspector turned militia captain, nodded grimly. We can station sharpshooters along the ridge, but we'll need barricades here in the street to funnel them into our line of fire. Outside, Thomas and Helena led teams of miners and townsfolk in stacking wooden crates, mining carts, and barrels of sand to fortify the main thoroughfare. Women and children joined, hauling planks and slingshot rocks into makeshift stockades. Everyone, shopkeeper, blacksmith, saloon cook, pulled double duty, united by the threat to their shared enterprise. By twilight, the barricades stood solid, angled to create choke points. Lanterns hung from poles, ready to be lifted at the first sign of trouble. Eleanor walked the line, offering quiet encouragement. Remember, we defend our home, our charter, and each other. Do not fire unless they draw first blood. Her voice carried authority tempered by empathy. No one doubted her resolve. A low whistle drifted from beyond the eastern hills. The sheriff signaled, and horses' hooves clattered against packed dirt as a dozen deputies formed a skirmish line. In the darkness, figures emerged. A ragged band of outlaws led by the notorious Jed One-Eyed Crane, Morgan Crane's disgraced brother, seeking vengeance and gold. He swung a lantern, its beam carving shadows across a waving black banner. Y'all think you can steal from Bainbridge's former mine? Jed Crane's voice rang, cruel and mocking. We take what we want. He raised his rifle in a challenge. Samuel's whistle pierced the night. A coordinated volley cracked from the ridge above, sending outlaws scattering for cover. Miners above unleashed a hail of slugs from elevated posts built into the hillside. The first wave faltered under the surprise assault. Then Helena's crew, stationed at the eastern barricade, heaved sandbags onto Crane's advance party, driving them back behind the arroyo lip. Eleanor seized her lantern and rushed forward with Thomas and a hand-picked squad. Under the curry of light, she confronted Jed Crane at the base of the barricade. You will not pass, she declared. Her tone brooked no argument. The outlaw leveled his rifle, but the sudden appearance of Pepe at her side, revolver drawn, gave pause. Drop it, Jed, Pepe commanded. This town stands united. Crane hesitated, his one good eye flicking between their determined faces and the crowd of armed miners behind them. A storm of curses erupted from his lips as he spat on the ground. Then, with a reluctant snarl, he dropped his rifle. The remaining outlaws, witnessing their leader's capitulation, laid down arms in quick succession. Sheriff Lawson marched forward, handcuffs in hand. "You're under arrest," he growled, seizing Jed Crane in a firm grip. Deputies rounded up the band, securing them behind hastily set prison wagons. As shackles clicked, townsfolk cheered, drums of unity resounding through the night. Eleanor exhaled, tension ebbing. Flames from burning oil lamps painted every face in warm gold. She looked to the miners, the council, and the deputies. Today we defended more than gold. We defended our values, solidarity, justice, and self-determination. Let this be the last threat to Blackridge's peace. A roar of approval swept through the gathered crowd. Children waved lanterns, and miners clasped shoulders with deputies in uproarious celebration. In the shadow of the barricades, lantern light illuminated a shared victory that solidified the Charter's spirit as fiercely as any forged beam. As the hush of night returned, Eleanor felt the weight of leadership settle more lightly on her shoulders. They had protected their home from internal betrayal, outside investors, natural hazards, and now this siege. Blackridge Mine's future glowed brighter than any gold vein, forged in the unity of its people beneath the starlit west. Eleanor rode into town atop her grey mare as the sun gilded Blackridge Gulch in warm light. A festive bustle filled the streets, merchants hawking supplies, children racing with hand-drawn wagons, and banners fluttering between hastily erected poles proclaiming, "Long live the Charter." She dismounted before the newly restored schoolhouse, its weathered facade now painted white, window frames trimmed in sage green. A wooden sign above the door read, "Blackridge Academy." Pepe and Tomas joined her at the steps, alongside Mary Bishop, whose apron dusted with chalk and flour signified her dual roles as head cook and educator. Behind them, a modest crowd of miners' families gathered, emerald scarves tied at their necks as tokens of unity. Dr. Evelyn Harper stood at the doorway of the medical station, scrawled with first aid and care in neat letters. A table beneath her arm bore bandages, salves, and freshly mixed herbs. Eleanor cleared her throat and addressed the assembly. "Today, we mark two new milestones, education for our children and medical care for our community. These pillars will sustain Blackridge as surely as any gold seam." Mary stepped forward, handing colourful slate boards to eager youngsters. "Welcome, scholars," she called, her voice bright. "Today you learn letters, numbers, and the stories that shape our world." The children clamoured for seats on benches carved from reclaimed timber, their laughter echoing through the schoolhouse. Inside, Helena Cho arranged rows of desks, each inscribed with a carved name. "Every miner's child has a place here," she proclaimed, as parents guided their sons and daughters through the doorway. The room buzzed with newfound excitement. Half a dozen children practiced writing the alphabet on their slates, while a small group recited basic arithmetic under Mary's patient guidance. Outside, Dr. Harper inaugurated the medical station with a simple ribbon, an iris blue cloth cut by Helena. She welcomed the first patient, a miner with a gimpy ankle from an earlier collapse, and gently wrapped it in a supportive splint. "We are here for you," she assured him, tracing the small scar on his wrist. "Return any time." As the school bell rang and the clinic's lanterns were lit, Eleanor and Pepe convened the council beneath lantern-lit pavilions in the town square. Logs of each day's output, safety reports, and financial ledgers lay on a long table. Council members, Samuel Briggs, Luis Garcia, Mary Bishop, and Helena Cho, each took their place. Eleanor opened the meeting. "The academy and clinic are operational. Now we allocate the next profit share." She handed out stamped certificates to miners representing their cumulative earnings. The total yield for this cycle stood at 9,600 ounces of gold, an impressive jump thanks to the new vein and improved pumping systems. Luis reviewed the figures. After 50% for infrastructure and 25% for reinvestment, we allocate 2,400 ounces. With 125 workers this cycle, each receives 19.2 ounces, plus a bonus ounce for those with perfect attendance. He tapped the ledger. These certificates can be redeemed at the assay office starting tomorrow." A round of applause greeted the announcement. Miners embraced each other, exchanging hearty handshakes. Children on their way home peeked from doorways, eyes wide at the sight of families clasping certificates as if they were precious scrolls. That evening, as lanterns swayed in the breeze, Eleanor walked the main drift's upper galleries. She paused at a reinforced crossbeam bearing her chalked signature and the date. Beneath it, cracks that once threatened collapse were now sealed by steel girders. A gentle drip of clear water echoed through the corridor, testament to the revived drainage pump. She stood with Pepe and Thomas at the overlook where the chasm yawned below. The distant rumble of the water wheel sounded like a heartbeat. "We've come far," Pepe murmured, gazing at the shimmering vein wall. "But tomorrow we push deeper." Eleanor nodded. "Our charter has delivered promise, education, health, safety, and shared wealth. Now we harvest that promise for generations to come." She turned back toward the lantern-lit exit, the mine's torchlit corridors stretching ahead, like pathways to a brighter future. Behind her, Blackridge Academy and the medical station stood as symbols of their triumph, a community transformed by courage, cooperation, and the unbreakable bonds of trust. The dawn wind carried a crisp promise as Eleanor stood atop the wooden platform overlooking the gulch. Below, Blackridge Mine's entrance gaped like a welcome smile, framed by lantern-lit beams and freshly painted timbers. The sluice boxes below shimmered with golden flecks, and the water wheel turned with steady purpose. Behind her, the town thrummed with life, a testament to every trial they had endured and every victory they had forged. Eleanor took a steadying breath, letting the morning light warm her face. 30 days underground, and countless struggles later, the mine and its community stood united under a banner of fairness, safety, and shared prosperity. Today they would celebrate the first anniversary of the Charter's ratification, marking a full cycle of work, learning, and growth. Pepe approached, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. "It's almost time," he said gently, offering her a mug. Thomas followed, balancing a crate of fresh-baked loaves from Mary's bakery. "Ceremony starts in 10, he added, placing the crate at Eleanor's feet. She nodded, gratitude filling her chest. "Thank you both. Let's make this a day to remember." A horn sounded from the sheriff's office bell tower, its clear note echoing through the canyon walls. Miners emerged from the shafts in their Sunday best, lace around collars for women, clean vests and brushed boots for men, each clutching a certificate of service that symbolized their share in the mine's success. Children flocked around the schoolhouse, clutching slates and chalk, eager to demonstrate their newfound literacy. From the medical station, nurses emerged with first aid ribbons pinned to their aprons, ready to honor volunteers who had kept the clinic running. The procession formed behind the saloon, winding down Main Street toward the newly planted oak grove at the gulch's edge. There, a simple stone monument bore the engraved words, "Founders of the Blackridge Charter, Eleanor Harper, Jose Ramirez, and the Council of Miners." Beneath their names, the date of the charter's signing was cut in precise letters. Eleanor led the procession, Pepe and Tomas at her side. The townsfolk, merchants, farmers and ranchers lined the street with cheers and waves. Even Augustine Bainbridge, now a silent observer, stood on his veranda in a plain coat, his silk cravat long gone. He tipped his hat respectfully as he watched the community he once controlled march in harmony. As they reached the monument, Sheriff Lawson stepped forward, hammering a final bronze plaque onto the stone. "To all who risk their lives for gold and each other." He stepped back and raised his voice. "May this charter and these bonds endure as long as these hills stand." Eleanor approached, placing her hand over the plaque. She felt the coolness of the metal, the weight of history bearing down with pride and hope for the future. In her free hand, she held a small sapling, an oak shoot to be planted as the living counterpart to the stone monument. She knelt and set it into the soft earth, Pepe and Thomas shoveling soil around its roots. "Today, Eleanor said, voice clear and resonant. We plant for tomorrow. As this tree grows, so will Blackridge, rooted in the principles we fought for and reaching ever upward in unity. Miners, families, and townsfolk each added a handful of soil, symbolizing their individual contributions to the collective legacy. Children pressed sweetgrass flowers at the sapling's base, and Mary distributed slices of celebratory cake. Laughter and song filled the air, joined by the distant hum of the water wheel and the clarion call of the mine bell. As the festivities continued, Eleanor stole a moment alone at the mine entrance. The dark portal no longer whispered curses, but instead beckoned with opportunity. She gathered her lantern and toolkit, slipping inside for one final inspection of the tunnels she had helped transform. Each reinforced beam, each braced wall, each chalked arrow pointing the way signified countless lives spared and fortunes shared. At the heart of the deepest chamber, she paused before the gleaming central vein, a ribbon of pure gold that had once symbolized oppression, but now stood for possibility. She placed a small carved token at its base, a heart encircled by hands, the emblem of the charter. It was a reminder that the true wealth of Blackridge Mine lay not in the gold it yielded, but in the strength, trust, and vision of its people. Emerging back into sunlight, Eleanor found Pepe waiting with a warm smile. "What did you find?" he asked. "Nothing that isn't already here," she replied, gesturing to the bustling gulch and the vibrant oak sapling. "Our greatest discovery is each other. But I kept a promise I made under that blazing sun in Blackridge Gulch," Eleanor added, voice soft yet firm. "I vowed I'd prove the curse could be broken, and today, surrounded by our community, I have." Hand in hand, they walked back to the celebration, where the community raised their mugs in a toast. The oak grove swayed gently in the breeze. The monument gleamed in the afternoon sun, and Blackridge Mine's legacy shone brighter than any vein of gold, an enduring testament to courage, collaboration, and the power of one determined woman to upend a billionaire magnate's world and build something far richer in its place.